Chapter 14. The Man in the Shadows. April 11th, 2086. Bozeman, Montana. The Stormbreakers were waiting. Varian, Corder, Setla, and Kingi looked down on a lonely mountain road from their vantage points atop rocky hills. High above, the Niagara circled like a hawk. Nainu and Maui sat in the cockpit while in the crew compartment a heated discussion carried on. George Farshty and Robert Lansing were trying to convince the four Wolverines to join in their upcoming escapade. So far, Lawrence and Sarah were on board, while Piper and Jay were holding out. "This isn't like 2 years ago," Jay was saying. "I've got a family now. My husband damn near flipped his lid when I vanished for a week, only to come home with a bunch of new scars. And what about Milo? The kid's only 2. I need to be there for him." Robert paced up and down the fuselage, struggling to find the most convincing argument. "Look, Jay," he said, "I'm not asking you to go to war again. You've paid those dues already. But the professor's daughter needs help right now. Jericho only knows what's happened to her since we lost her." Robert folded his arms and gave his son a look. "When was the last time you went home, Jay?" "About 3 days ago," Jay replied. "And did you see the people I paid to guard your house?" Robert asked. "The mercenaries?" "Yeah, I did." "Well, those mercenaries are from the same group Varian is meeting today. You can trust me, son. Anthony and Milo are going to be perfectly safe if you come with us for another couple of days." At this, Piper scoffed. "Shrike? Really?" Everyone looked at her. Lawrence raised an eyebrow. You know these guys?" "Yeah," Piper said, her arms folded. "Shrike is bad news. You've seen them before, Jay, when the fighting was hot." Nobody spoke, and she went on. "Shrike is a splinter group. They were founded by a bunch of XCOM soldiers who hated the UN's decision to make peace and alliances with alien races instead of conquering them. They ran wild all over the Earth for a few years after the Second Hyperspace War, but in the last 10 years or so, they've kinda taken a turn. They started hoarding weapons and ammo and building tunnel networks around their bases. Also, they destroyed all of their androids and hired people to replace them." "Well, that must have been expensive," George grumbled. "They've been offering their services to just about anyone to pay for it all," Piper explained. "Lawrence, I know you remember fighting Shrike before. Remember Mount Pleasant? Those guys who rolled up our flanks and killed Abby? They were Shrike. General Jackson paid them off." Sarah winced. Lawrence looked over at her in concern. 2 years ago, Lawrence had personally murdered the warlord Jackson after learning he was involved in the death of Sarah's younger sister. To this day, Lawrence and Sarah still had trouble looking one another in the eye. "Sarah? Are you okay?" Lawrence started to ask. "What does it matter?" Sarah cut him off. "Shrike didn't kill Abby. Jackson did." Piper pressed on. "About 4 months later, I hired Shrike," she confessed. "That's why they brought a hijacked supply train to your base and left it there." "Huh," Jay said. "So, those guys aren't too attached to whoever hires them?" "They're mercenaries," Piper said. "They'll fight for whoever's got credits. After that, they don't really do loyalties." Down below on the ground, Corder saw movement. Her lion-like reflexes took over, and she hunched to the ground. Her eyes and ears focused on a distant point over the crest of the next hill. Gazing through her rifle scope, Corder spotted an armored vehicle snaking its way through a valley. She checked her watch and then spoke into her radio. "Coming straight to you, Inez, and they're right on schedule." The lone vehicle traveled for another mile through the valley before coming to a stop in front of a fork in the road. The doors swung open and 4 men got out. They were all wearing plated armor with hoods and masks that obscured their faces. Each man carried a magnetic rifle. The apparent leader of the group stepped towards a copse of trees, just to one side of the road. "Well, you called for Sovereign, and I have come," the man shouted. "Show yourself!" With a soft rustle, Varian stepped out of the foliage. He, or she, kept their plasma rifle at the low ready. "Stormbreaker," Sovereign said. "How I hoped we would have the chance to meet. You see, you and I are alike. We both know of a greater threat, that the conflicts around us are part of a deeper whole." "How would you like to strike a blow against that greater threat?" Varian asked. "We've got a situation in Bannack that requires some serious muscle." "Bannack, the place where Pascal Etienne does research forbidden by UN law," Sovereign mused. "Their work is an affront to human decency and actively contributes to the disaster we have seen coming. But," Sovereign held up a hand to stop Varian interrupting, "Bannack is no soft target. We will require great compensation." Varian hung their rifle from a shoulder strap and produced a tablet computer. Sovereign reached out to one of his bodyguards and traded his own weapon for a tablet. "Large transactions of money can be traced," Varian said. "Do you have any contacts with Practical Industries? We can use them as a go-between, since they're on another planet." "I have such contacts," Sovereign confirmed. "I demand 7 million UN credits, all in advance." Varian narrowed her, or his, eyes at Sovereign. 2 million credits up front, Varian offered. "Plus, you'll get 15 million when I confirm our target has been rescued from Bannack." Sovereign and Varian stared at one another for almost a full minute. It was a very tense minute, too. Finally, just before Varian started to sweat, Sovereign said, "Very well. You've bought yourself a battle." April 12th, 2086. Twin Bridges, Montana. With a great deal of rumbling and thundering, a convoy of armored vehicles rolled down the battered track that used to be a highway. Infantry fighting vehicles, bristling with weapons, took the lead while trucks laden with soldiers followed behind. One vehicle, an armored truck, had 2 flags flying proudly on top of it. The first flag was a large banner with 13 red and white stripes running from left to right, while the upper left corner was adorned with a blue field that contained 51 white stars. The second flag was a blood-red banner with a blue and yellow coat of arms in the center, while the words Salish and Kutenai adorned the flag in black letters. This was a mechanized company of American soldiers. The convoy pressed on until the road curved up, following the contour of a hill. Coming to a stop just before the hilltop, an officer with a large bushy beard disembarked from his truck and started walking toward the group of people waiting for him. Varian, Corder, Kingi, and Setla were already here, waiting for the Americans alongside some 20 members of Shrike, including Sovereign himself. The American warlord shook hands with Varian and introduced himself. "General Osmer, United States Army. I guess you're going to be our dancing partner today?" "Yes, sir," Varian replied. "We need to take Bannack by storm. Can your men get it done?" "Honestly, We were hoping we could just burn that place to the ground, General Osmer replied. I had to leave most of my men in Virginia just to get here. How many soldiers did you bring? Sovereign asked. And can they take that base? I had to leave the bulk of my forces in Virginia, General Osmer reiterated. But I did bring along a trusted ally, and he was able to fish up some firepower. An American officer stepped forward and rendered a crisp salute. Just like General Osmer, this man was one of the many warlords who operated semi-independently from the rival American governments. Colonel Mason Sharp, Salish and Kootenai Tribal Confederation. The colonel took a deep breath. Whew, that's a mouthful. I know you, Varian said. You're the warlord who raided Missoula a few weeks ago. Did you really chase Commander Fontes on his men all the way back to Idaho? Colonel Sharp rolled his eyes. I prefer the title representative. The Tribal Confederation elected me to talk for them, after all, he said. And for the record, we chased the Boise boys right into the jaws of the progeny, all the way over in Hell's Canyon. Varian raised her, or his, eyebrows at the colonel. So, you and your people are ancient Americans? Varian asked. I thought they were extinct. We might as well be, Colonel Sharp admitted. Nearly all of the old tribes were wiped out by Advent, and the rest have since died out. Nitsipai, Apsaluke, Nakota Dakota, the Little Shell, they're all gone. What you see here represents all that's left of the Salish Kootenai Confederacy. Varian and the Stormbreakers looked at the military convoy again. Corder whimpered when she realized less than a quarter of the gathered American soldiers were fully grown men. The majority of the tribal soldiers were women and teenagers, while a few elderly men sat in the back of a truck. It was plainly obvious that every living member of this ancient tribe was right here on this lonely mountain road. Behind Varian, Nainu sighed. I feel sorry for those people, Nainu said to Maui. On my planet, the government has many programs in place to prevent the extinction of ethno-social groups. I've heard of this sort of thing happening on other worlds, but I never imagined I'd have to witness it. On Araki, we call it going the way of the snowskin, Maui added. That's what's happening to my family, the old Riri Nui clan. Not that many of us left either. Probably the same number as these Americans. The Salish Kootenai tribe added 40 rifles to the group, in addition to 20 members of Shrike, 6 Stormbreakers, and 4 Wolverines. 70 people would participate in the assault on Bannack Base. Varian met with Sovereign, General Osmer, and Colonel Sharp to plan the attack. Inez Espinosa joined them, as he had spent time inside the base and knew its layout very well. Bannack Base extends 8 levels below the ground, Inez said, and at any moment there are about 20 members of the UN military inside, plus about 100 military androids. We won't have the advantage of numbers today, General Osmer said. How do we storm this place? We don't have to. They'll come out to us, Emmanuel replied. Look here. Emmanuel knelt down and started to draw a map in the dirt with his finger. Bannack Base is entirely underground, and we can use that to our advantage, Emmanuel began. There are only 2 entrances. There's an industrial elevator concealed inside of Mead's Hotel next to Hangman's Gulch. There's also a pedestrian entrance right here where Grasshopper Creek curves to the north. It's going to look like the entrance to an ancient gold mine, but you can just walk into the base through there. My people will dynamite the mine entrance, Colonel Sharp said. That will force the defenders up through the elevator. You need to post some shooters on this hilltop, Emmanuel added. There are ventilation shafts up here. That's how the base gets its air supply. And the shafts have emergency ladders in case of an evacuation. You mentioned androids, Varian said. What kind? Emmanuel looked at Varian with a raised eyebrow, and the Stormbreaker replied. The UN inherited a whole army of robotic combat units from the Advent Coalition. Dozens of different types of robots, and some of them are more intelligent than others, depending on their specialization. Trust me, a fight against a mech trooper is completely different than a fight against something like a cyber disc, or a sectopod, or a codex. Emmanuel shuddered. Well, I can guarantee they have mech troopers down there. At least 100. Varian nodded. Good, those things are definitely not sentient. We can hack them. I'll talk to Maui when we're done here. General Osmer scratched his beard in thought. Now what exactly is the plan here? We don't have enough fighters to hold the ground once we take it. And if the Cheyenne faction finds out what we're doing here... General, with all due respect, Colonel Sharp interrupted, Cheyenne definitely knows we're here. They have their own recons in the mountains, just like us. If they weren't mauled by the progeny, then Fontes and the Boise Boys will be back in these mountains soon, if they aren't already. A space plane and a military convoy will not go unnoticed. Is there any way Columbus can send reinforcements this way? No, General Osmer replied. We are too deep inside of Cheyenne's territory. Plus, the UN's 7th Army is on the other side of the Cascades, just waiting for us to pull Cheyenne's troops away. This attack needs to be a hit and run. As for our objective, our Stormbreaker friend has that answer. Varian nodded and pulled 2 photographs out of their pocket. He, or she, passed them around the group and began to speak. These 2 girls are named Inez Espinosa and Cassandra. No last name for her. They're being held inside a Bannack Base, and rescuing them is our top priority right now. Honestly, this should have been done earlier, but we've got our asses in gear now. The plan is simple. We get in, grab the girls, get out. Everyone clear? How do you know the girls are inside the base? Colonel Sharp asked. Varian produced a tablet computer and showed the screen to the others. On display was a map of Bannack Base, complete with a blinking red light showing Inez Espinosa's exact location within the base. Inez has a tracking chip in her body, courtesy of a gene therapy clinic in Michigan. We compromise the signal so we can track her location at will. Has she left the base at all? General Osmer asked. Yes, Varian said with a nod. She went out on a military gunship, did a few laps around Virginia, then returned. We can't take a chance on her flying away and never coming back, because the trackers don't work when the person is in space. If Nezzy leaves the planet, we'll never find her again. So we need to rescue her right now. And if we can, we need to rescue Cassandra as well. The assembled leaders nodded grimly. April 14th, 2086. Bannack, Montana. Everything was set. Just like the black site in Alpena, Bannack Base was slowly and quietly surrounded in the dead of night. Varian personally selected a hilltop for the Stormbreakers to occupy, while General Osmer and the Americans took all of the remaining high ground. Colonel Sharp's forces brought a surprise with them, taking the shape of a heavy railgun, no doubt pulled off a former starship. Towed into position behind a truck, the railgun was pointed directly at the entrance to Bannack Base. About an hour before sunrise, one of the ancient Americans, dressed in camouflage fatigues, emerged from the shadows and climbed to meet the Stormbreakers on the high ground. He delivered the following report. Something is happening at Bannack. Starships are coming and going from the site in great numbers. Each vessel stays on the landing pad for only a few minutes, where it takes on passengers and cargo before lifting off again. Corder flattened her ears. Damn it, the jig is up! They must know we're here! Varian shook his or her head. No, hold on a second, Varian said. Was the base on alert? No, sir, the scout replied. Guards are at a minimum, and most of the base staff are helping load passengers and crew onto their ships. Nainu cradled his laser pistol, looking concerned. Finally, he spoke. Wait a minute. Those passengers being put on the ships, can you describe them? The scout nodded, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. Children, he said. Alien children. I saw Tidani, Ashurian, Partogan, and Higarans. Boys and girls alike, marching with guns at their backs, chained together by the wrists and ankles. Levakian cubs in cages, Kelt hatchlings in boxes, and so on. Setla spoke in a low grumble. Did you see any human girls? Black hair, pale skin, a little skinny, perhaps malnourished. The scout leaned forward and whispered, Yes, a small twig of a girl, no older than 10. Short black hair. She was handcuffed, shackled at the ankles, and gagged. She was so restrained, you would think she was the most dangerous killer in the whole base. Cassandra, Kingi breathed. That's definitely her. What happened to her? Nainu asked the scout. She was placed aboard a UN starship. It flew southeast. All 6 of the Stormbreakers forgot to breathe. Finally, Maui said, Son of a Kinloka! She's gone! Kingi turned to Varian. Quick, check the tracker. Is Nezzy still in the base? Varian quickly whipped out her or his tablet computer and fired up the tracking program. Shit! Varian cursed. She just left the base, and she's walking towards the starship port. She's gonna leave! Varian pointed to the scout. Tell the Americans to start the attack right now. We can't wait any longer. Then they spoke to the rest of the Stormbreakers. We're going in now, and we're gonna raise hell. We have to stop all takeoffs and landings. Nainu, keep the radio close and coordinate with the Americans. Yes, ma'am, right away, the scout said before he ran off to rejoin his comrades. The team rose to their feet and gathered their weapons. It was too late to rescue Cassandra, but perhaps they could still save Inez. As the seconds ticked by, all 6 Stormbreakers readied their weapons for battle. Even little Nainu was ready, gripping a full-sized laser pistol as though it was a rifle. Just before the first shots were fired, Maui let out a very loud gasp that caused everyone to jump with surprise. What? Nainu cried out. What is it? Maui reached up and tapped his smart glasses. The Shadow Man is calling. He's lighting up the Niagara's hyperwave relay. Are you kidding me? Varian grumbled. Didn't we tell him we were doing this attack tonight? Yeah, Corder replied. He definitely knows already. Maui grimaced. His smart glasses were flickering as the digital screens showed one message after another. Then, Maui actually shouted. He tore off his smart glasses and uttered the single most offensive mother of all swear words in the Partogan language. What is it? Demanded the other 5 Stormbreakers. Shadow Man just sent a text message to my freaking glasses! Maui growled. How the fuck did he figure out how to do that? Corder grabbed Maui and shook him vigorously. What did he say, Uplink? She demanded. Maui looked at his teammates. The Shadow Man says that we need to call off the assault. Without hesitation, Corder turned and loped away toward the American soldiers, yowling at the top of her lungs, Stop! Call it off! Stop the attack! But it was too late. With a mighty crash, the American railgun opened fire on Bannack Base. The assault had begun. Varian, Setla, Kingi, and Nainu all looked around frantically. American fighters were advancing towards Bannack, firing laser and plasma weapons toward the UN soldiers in the distance. Maui shook his head. Sorry, guys. But he's waiting on us. Espinosa's already in the Niagara. With extreme reluctance, the Stormbreakers disengaged from the fight they so desperately wanted to join. All 6 members of the team withdrew from the scene, falling back to the old Bannack Cemetery, where the Niagara was idling. Professor Espinosa was standing at the bottom of the boarding ramp, waving at the Stormbreakers to approach. Even though all 7 people were relatively close to one another, they had to yell because the sounds of nearby gunfire and cannon blasts were overpowering. "What the hell, Espinosa?" Varian shouted. "We don't have time for this!" "Tell that to your boss," Emmanuel answered. "When you guys didn't answer the hyperwave, he called on one of the Americans' phones. Then he called another. Then he found Maui's techno goggles. Just get in the ship already." The Stormbreakers, plus Emmanuel, boarded the Niagara and closed the boarding hatch, shutting out the noise of the battle outside. Moving quickly, Maui moved to the hyperwave terminal in the crew compartment and took the Shadow Man's call. "Let's get this done and over with already," Quarter growled. "We're gonna lose Nezzy!" Around the crew compartment, a series of hologram emitters blinked and flickered to life. A dark image, vaguely shaped like a human, materialized in the center of the room. Even though this was a hologram, the person it was supposed to depict was very poorly lit. It was downright impossible to discern what this person looked like, beyond the fact that they were an adult, humanoid male. Emmanuel Espinosa had no idea who this person was, so he hung out near the back of the group and watched the following discussion play out. "This is a really bad time, sir," Setla began. "This delay is going to cost us dearly." "We might lose Espinosa's daughter because of this," Quarter added. The Shadow Man shook his head. "I think that may be for the best," the Shadow Man said. "The report you submitted from the UN Black Site in Alpena was very alarming. So much so that I cannot permit you to retrieve the Professor's daughter at this time." "Now, hold on a minute," Varian cut in. "The Professor is right here. Surely he wants his kid back, sir." Everyone looked around at Professor Espinosa. He gave the Shadow Man a very nervous look. "I guess this means you spoke with Mr. Riri Nui about my suspicions." The Shadow Man nodded. Maui scratched his head. "Sir, I told you we had no proof. Is this really worth scrubbing the assault?" Maui insisted. Before the Shadow Man could answer, Nainu interrupted. "Riri Nui, are you keeping a secret from us?" The team started talking out of turn. Some wanted to resume the attack on Bannack. Others were demanding Maui and Emmanuel reveal whatever they were keeping hidden. In the middle of it all, Varian narrowed his or her eyes at Emmanuel. When Varian spoke, their voice was so stern that everyone fell silent. "Professor Espinosa, you clearly know more than what you're letting on." Varian rounded on the hologram of the Shadow Man. "And you have obviously figured something out. So, spill." There was a moment of relative silence. The dull, muted sounds of gunfire could be heard through the Niagara's fuselage. Kingi stepped toward the boarding hatch and chambered around in his rotary plasma cannon. "This had better be good, boss," Kingi said, "or I'm gonna go back and help out the Americans." The Shadow Man's face was impossible to see, but his reluctance to speak was palpable. Finally, he spoke. "When Professor Espinosa joined you in Alpena, he told his story to Maui Ririnui, and Maui relayed the story to me. I cross-referenced his story with the information you gathered over the past 2 years, and I came to a conclusion." "No proof," Emmanuel grumbled. "Even I don't have proof. Just a sneaking suspicion." "Professor, "Your evidence is circumstantial, but the timing checks out," replied the Shadow Man. "I am convinced, and so are my associates. Stormbreakers, you must understand that what I'm about to tell you does not go outside of this starship. This secret has the potential to be very destructive." "I'm on my way out the door," Kingi called out. "Tell us why we should let Espinosa's daughter stay with the UN." "Because it is too late to save her." The Shadow Man actually raised his voice. "It is beyond too late." And then the Shadow Man revealed Emmanuel's secret. At once, the atmosphere inside the vessel shifted from one of nervous apprehension to one of revulsion and horror. It was as though all 6 Stormbreakers had been dipped into the vile substance nightmares are made from, and then deposited back into the Niagara. Everyone felt nauseous, disgusted, and violated. The knowledge itself was evil, a heinous crime against the sanctity of life, the universe, and everything. Varian dropped their weapon to the floor. Maui felt a cold sweat running down his face. Nainu pressed the barrel of his laser pistol against his own body, realized his arms were too short to reach the trigger, and then burst into tears. Setla felt sick and had to sit down while Quarter actually hunched over and vomited, heaving repeatedly until her stomach was empty. Kingi stumbled from shock and had to lean against the wall. Emmanuel looked pale. While he had his suspicions, the thing Emmanuel was dreading was finally confirmed. Then Kingi rounded on Emmanuel. You! I didn't know!" Emmanuel shouted back. "I swear I didn't know!" "Bullshit!" Varian shrieked, their eyes filling with tears. "If there's really 2 of them out there, it means you fucked her at least twice, you sick freak! Did you even know what you were doing? Don't lie!" "What were you thinking?" Quarter screamed. "Anything at all?" "I didn't know!" Emmanuel insisted. "I swear, on my life, I didn't know it was her!" "Well, when did you find out?" Nainu demanded. 6 months ago," Emmanuel choked. He was starting to cry now. "I thought about killing about ending it all." "You selfish prick!" Quarter snarled. "At least slit the hellspawn's throats first." "Do not talk about my daughters like that!" Emmanuel shouted. The screaming and arguing within the Niagara lasted long after the gunfire around Bannack fell silent. Once the confrontation was over, and everybody had lost their voices, the Stormbreakers and Emmanuel came to an agreement on 3 fronts. First, Inez Espinosa was a lost cause, and rescuing her was no longer worth the effort. She would be on her own until the time came when contacting her was actually worth the risk. Second, Professor Espinosa was much closer to the true purpose of the Prometheus project than even he realized. Last, and most importantly, the Stormbreakers were going to need help. It was time to leave Earth and visit a certain ally.